Everyone's been talking about Cartier recently, and I, for one, am tired of it. It's this obsession I've seen over the last year in the industry, and I don't really fully understand why. This thought came to my head a few days ago. This is September 2023, when Cartier released a new platinum tank cintre. On the surface, it is a beautiful watch, and I'm not going to deny that. It's limited to 150 pieces, it's in platinum, it's got that eggshell dial, it's got the red cabochon with the ruby, and it's a part of their Layer Edition series, which is basically them bringing back old models like the Pebble. They did the yellow gold cintre as well. And then they've also done the Perpetual Calendar Pasha. They're pretty much just making slight modern updates to these vintage watches, making them extremely limited edition so you and me can't buy them, but we could talk about them. So I saw this watch and I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. Like for 15 grand, you know, a platinum Cartier. Like I think that's great. And then I read the label and I'm like, it's $38,500. I had absolutely no words. I thought because, you know, maybe the limited edition status of this watch and the others in the series, that they made the price this high because they're only making 150 of them. The people that are actually buying these watches have spent hundreds and thousands, if not millions of dollars at Cartier. So $38,500 is like a penny to them compared to me and you. But as I started doing more research, I'm like, okay, if that's $38,500, what are the rest of their watches? You know, stainless steel stuff, their yellow gold stuff. What does this look like? That's why I came across the medium steel Santos. $7,000 for a very basic stainless steel watch, basic dial, a so-so movement, not an amazing movement. Get 100 meters of water resistance, it's $7,000. It's beautiful. I mean, I recommend to people sometime, but $7,000? Even some of the entry-level Rolexes with this build quality, a much better build quality at that than the Santos, are priced under $7,000. Then take a look at the Steel Tank Must. This is a quartz watch, not great build quality, not great water resistance, a so-so leather strap at this price. This comes in at $3,100. What am I missing here? A steel watch with a leather band with a quartz movement, not great build quality at all, especially compared to the yellow gold and platinum and all these other different variations of the tank. How is it $3,100? Why is nobody talking about this overpriced craziness that's going on at Cartier? So I thought, okay, this is definitely true of modern Cartier, but most of the collectors I see talking about Cartier are talking about vintage Cartier. And this is a whole other story that I think is just opening up a can of worms that nobody's talking about. Vintage Cartier is a treasure trove, and also just there are so many horror stories involved with vintage Cartier as well. So if you thought vintage Rolex was hard to decipher, nobody knows what's real parts, fake parts, aftermarket, Franken watches, and all this, Cartier is 10 times worse. For Rolex, there's not a lot of documentation, but you can find some articles and things like that. Cartier, there's literally absolutely nothing. 70s and 80s and even earlier, there are so many custom jobs where there's literally one of one that were made. So much so that nobody knows what's a custom job and what's not. And because none of these have paperwork, because back then, as most collectors know, as you probably know, they don't have paperwork and documentation of these watches from back then because nobody knew that enhanced the value. When you look at vintage Cartier, there's so many custom jobs, there's no documentation, you don't know where it came from. Cartier won't even admit that these are real or not, or fake or Franken or whatever. And this is the problem. There's not a single person in the entire watch world that could look at a vintage Cartier watch and 100% tell you it's real or it's fake. Telling a fake can be easy when it's a very bad fake, and I can admit that. But thinking if something is real, you can't 100% say something is real when looking at vintage Cartier. You can barely do it with Rolex. Cartier's, it's crazy. You can't take the Cartier Crash, for example. These can be hundreds of thousands of dollars, and they're really cool. I can admit that. I mean, you just have to take one look at the design, and you're like, that's pretty cool. For hundreds of thousands of dollars for a slight piece of precious metal in a very cool design, but what is making that hundreds of thousands of dollars? Once you start getting this higher upper echelon, what's to say a Crash is worth hundreds of thousands and a Rolex is worth tens of thousands? It's a demand, but also there's so few of them that the dealers can say whatever the hell they want. I do understand the collector obsession to Cartier. Could you not, in a way? They have extremely important watches. They have so many one-of-one pieces, more than almost any brand you could possibly think of because of all of these custom jobs. I know specifically in New York, they did so many of them for different people. But again, who's to say any of these rare pieces you see online, one-of-one, you know, custom job from Paris, Who's to say these are real? Because Cartier won't even verify. Right now, Cartier is having a moment in the watch industry. Like Bad Bunny, I've seen Tom Brady, and there's so many collectors that have Cartier. In my opinion, this is not going to last. Small watches are in, large watches are out. Give it 5 years and Cartier will be repositioned. They'll be back to what they were 5 years ago.